Traditionally, we understood human existence through theology, concepts like grace, salvation, and the soul. Today, we define our reality through the language of engineering, systems, feedback loops, and data packets. These two domains have remained isolated, yet bridging them reveals a consistent structural reality. A human being functions as a highly complex client node operating on a distributed cosmic network. This network relies on a central source, the Eden Love Field, or ELF. It broadcasts an infinite bandwidth of data and direction across the universe. Mapping the operating system of the soul allows us to identify the mechanics behind this connection. By analyzing our internal hardware tiers, we can identify specific psychological bottlenecks, examine a historical reference model for zero-latency connection, and execute the network protocol required for a stable downlink. Moving spiritual growth into system mechanics transforms character development into a process of systemic calibration. Ancient texts like Genesis describe humans as a combination of dust and divine breath. In engineering terms, this describes a bill of materials consisting of a physical hardware base and an embedded edge kernel. This hardware base consists of 4 tiers. First is the body processor, managing autonomic feedback. It compiles physical habits into macro programs, freeing up system bandwidth. Above it sits the mind processor. It runs an adaptive ego program, constantly calculating environmental data to ensure survival. The mind processor holds a specific design feature, the ego override privilege. This gives the mind the authority to reject commands originating from higher tiers of the network. This override privilege provides the engineering basis for free will. A system without the capacity to reject a command outputs only automated compliance. Love, by contrast, requires a system capable of choosing to respond. The third tier, the soul processor, serves as the supervisor controller. It monitors internal data buses, evaluating the mind's decisions against a baseline of structural truth. When the mind drifts from its intended specs, the soul processor generates error correction signals. These signals manifest in human experience as the sting of conscience or a persistent spiritual thirst. At the center of the architecture is the holy processor, the divine fragment. This functions as the system's embedded bootloader. This core kernel is a proprietary installation from the source, designed specifically to communicate with the master server. The value of the human system is tethered to the provenance of this core kernel. Because its source is divine, the system's fundamental dignity remains constant, even as the biological hardware eventually fails. The operational goal of this entire architecture is a zero-loss downlink from the master server to the physical layer. In engineering, maximum power transfer requires matched impedance. The Eden Love Field broadcasts with zero source impedance, meaning no resistance. Resistance occurs at the client end. The ego's field generates load resistance. When the divine signal hits this barrier, it cannot transmit through the system. Instead, the signal reflects at the boundary. This creates standing wave friction inside the local network. We experience this friction as dark pain, existential suffering and anxiety caused by an inability to process the incoming transmission. Mystics call the solution to this friction kenosis, or self-emptying. In system terms, this is the protocol of impedance matching. By silencing the ego's survival calculations, load resistance drops towards zero. The signal reflections vanish, and the server's data flows flawlessly through the system. This requires accepting white pain, the temporary calibration cost of dropping the ego's defenses to allow the signal through. Divine grace functions as a constant, unceasing broadcast. The primary variable in the downlink is the level of resistance the human client chooses to maintain. Maintaining zero resistance in a high-noise, high-stress environment is a significant challenge for a standard human client. To prove the system's potential, we look to a zero-latency reference architecture, Jesus Christ. The incarnation represents the master server's full dataset executing in the physical layer with 100% fidelity. The historical event of the crucifixion served as a brutal systemic stress test, executed under maximum environmental noise. Despite the input of extreme betrayal and physical pain, the system's synchronization held. It output forgiveness rather than defensive resistance. The resurrection demonstrates session persistence, confirming that the kernel's connection to the server remains intact even after the destruction of the hardware. Emulating this model involves utilizing this reference architecture to calibrate local system synchronization. Once the ego's impedance is cleared, the data must be compiled into reality. This occurs through the 5-step sequence of the incarnation of knowledge. Step 1 is hearing. Raw data enters the system's volatile memory buffer. In Step 2, inner confirmation, the edge kernel cross-references the data with the master server to verify its authenticity. Step 3, the soul's knowing, converts raw data into a structural, existential value. In Step 4, the mind's understanding, the data is recompiled into the local ego's language so it can be utilized. Step 5 is physical action. The hardware layer writes the data into permanent cellular habit. A failure at any step results in a stalled process. This explains why theoretical knowledge often fails to result in a change in physical behavior. The data has entered the buffer, but it hasn't reached the physical layer. When the 5-step sequence is completed flawlessly, the system generates a specific confirmation. This systemic confirmation is the Joy ACK packet. Joy functions as a physical layer confirmation packet. It signals back to the cosmic server that the data has been successfully written to the system without error. This feedback loop physically alters the system, increasing kernel sensitivity for future transmissions. Spiritual maturity consists of the daily systemic calibration required to clear resistance, allowing the code of the universe to execute flawlessly in physical reality.